tracking data versus not tracking data. What difference does it make in our trading? You might think it doesn't really make a difference like that, but when you take a deeper look into it, you can see that tracking data might give you that small tip that you need to move to consistent profitability. And there's different aspects of it, and that's what I'll dive into today. So these are the different aspects, and this is tracking data, not tracking data. And tracking data will give you, tracking data versus not tracking data will give you two different outcomes based on, in terms of the different aspects that there are. So let's go into decision making. So as traders, we are making it's a decision making game, right? And if we do track our data, the decisions that we do make is based on evidence and patterns. Whereas if we don't track our data, our decisions are made based on emotion and memory. And one of these two leads to consistent profitability and sustainability in this game. And I would tip towards tracking data, because we have something that we can go off continuously on a day-to-day basis. Okay, on a continuous basis that we can follow over and over again, and that's more likely to lead to a consistent result. So if you want consistent results as a trader, we need to do something consistently. And if we're going based off something that we've seen in the past and based off our previous performance, that's more likely to lead to that consistent outcome that we want. However, if we're not tracking and we're going based off emotion and memory, each day we're showing up and we're doing something a bit different to the day before. So from that, we can see that if we do that over a long period of time, it's going to give us an outcome that we're not really sure on, because we're essentially, again, going off based on emotion and memory, which is not really sustainable, and we can't do that over and over again continuously the same way over and over again. Performance visibility. So when we track our data, our wins, our metrics, our wins and losses, our current, what we're at, what percentage we're at for the month, the week, the quarter is clear, and we can see with clear metrics the wins and losses. We can track our so the flipping our win rate. I can't even talk today. Our win rate, average winner, all these different things is tracked there. However, if we haven't tracked that, there's no real feedback loop. We don't know what we're currently working. We don't know if we're in drawdown. We don't know if we're currently up for the year, up for the month, the week, the quarter. We don't know. We're just going based off whatever, basically, and that's not what we want to do as traders. Improvement. So when we track our data, mistakes are visible and clear. And when mistakes are visible and clear, we can go back over a certain period and see if we're making this mistake over and over and over again. And from that, we can then remove that certain mistake or make a certain tweak to adjust our results. So if we're getting involved in the same setup, which is not providing us a result that we want, so we're getting involved in this trade, and every time we do, it's a loss, we can then aim to eliminate that from our trade, eliminate that from our trading, and hopefully see a better result. However, if you don't track, the mistakes that we make is more often than not going to go unnoticed, or we might spot the mistake in a moment and we forget it. Like the improvements that we need to make there's more, it's more vague, so we can't really make the improvements that we do need to make and move toward that consistent profitability that we do want. When it comes to our emotions now, our emotions are always going to be there, but it's likely to be reduced because we have clear data to go back on. Again, we can go over the last month, quarter, year, and we can see that so if you're going through a drawdown, for example, we can see, okay, this happened in the past, and overall for the year, for the quarter, I still ended in profit. So we're going to be less emotional if we have tracked our data and we can see and we've got something to go back on. However, if we don't have our previous trades tracked and we have nothing journaled, we're more likely to be dominated by fear and greed. So if we're in a drawdown, we're in the same scenario, two traders, one tracked their data, the other person didn't track their data, they're more likely to be in fear if they are in that drawdown, because they may have experienced it before, but because they have nothing to go back on, they are a bit more scared. They might reduce their risk now. They might become more fearful of the markets because, again, they've forgotten about what has gone in the past and how they still made it back, and they still moved towards equity high. They still gained equity highs, if that makes sense. Gained equity highs. You get the gist of what I'm saying. Yeah. So the learning process is going to be much more smoother if you do track your data, and it's going to be more structured because you have data to make tweaks. So it's kind of simply to touch on to the improvements that I did talk about. So you're able to go back on the mistakes that you made, the thought processes, and all the different aspects, and you're able to make tweaks, and it's more likely to be a faster learning process. Whereas if you didn't track anything, it's unstructured and you got nothing to work from, you may be making a mistake over and over again, but you can't make the significant tweaks because it's not aware. You're not aware of it. Whereas if you tracked it, it's there right in front of your eyes. However, if it's untracked, you're basically going off of what you feel is right. You might even take away. Something might be working for you, but because you might experience a drawdown again, going into the same thing, a drawdown again, and it's something that is working, but because you're going off of how you feel and what's happening right now, you might decide to remove that thing that's working, and now you're going off of something that's not working. Again, that's detrimental to your consistency. Accountability. So you can measure your discipline and errors if you track your data. You can go back in the past and see what the results were when you followed your daily process and when you didn't follow your daily process, and from that you can then make necessary tweaks in your process to move towards that individual that you need to be to produce a consistent result. When you don't track, you can easily rationalize mistakes. So there's no accountability here. You're showing up to the markets each and every day and just doing whatever you feel. So you can't go back and make necessary tweaks on that. And you may feel more free here, however you're not learning and you're not growing as a trader. And how are you going to become consistent if you're not doing that? Do you understand what I'm saying? It's less likely to happen if you're not tracking your data. And going on to clarity now. So clarity overall will be higher. You'll be clearer on what you need to do in terms of your plan, in terms of entry, exit, management, in terms of risk management, if you have tracked your data, because you have something again to go back on. When you haven't tracked, you're not clear about anything. You're showing up each and every day and going off of feels, and we do not want to go off of feels. We need to go off of data, and that data is likely to produce us results that we would like. We want to show up in the markets every day and execute to the best of our ability and have a clear mind when we're doing so. If we haven't tracked our data and we're going off of willy-nilly information that's stored in our mind, then we're more likely to make mistakes and continue to make those mistakes. Where if we tracked our data, if we make a mistake, we track it, we log it, we can then see in the past, have we made this mistake? Have we followed our plan? Have we done all these different things? And doing so, this will move us into that state of profitability and consistency that we need in order to produce that consistent result